Welcome all, and thank you for joining TÜV SÜD's complimentary webinar titled Navigating TISAX, Elevate Your Information Security in the Automotive Sector with TÜV SÜD America. Presented today by Sebastian Tetzlaff, Senior Consultant Information Security, ISO 27001 Lead Auditor, and Tobias Wankmuller, Senior Consultant Information Security, TISAX Lead Auditor, both at Syngenity for TÜV SÜD America, Inc. Before we begin the presentation today, we have a few housekeeping rules. If you or someone you know is having connection issues, please connect through LAN instead of Wi-Fi, if available, for better connectivity. Also, please view this webinar through recommended browsers of Chrome, Edge, or Firefox if available. All participants are muted today to avoid any background noise during the webinar. For the questions and answers portion of today's session, please submit your questions online via the Q&A tab on your screen. And there is a short survey. Please participate in this short survey. We truly appreciate your feedback. Now let me introduce TÜV SÜD as well as our session today. TÜV SÜD is world-renowned for providing international testing, assessment, training, and certification services. For over 150 years, with offices in over 1,000 locations in 50 countries and represented by over 28,000 employees. As a global leader in management system certification, validation, and verification audits, TÜV SÜD's extensive industry experience and expertise elevate the management systems of our clients through our unique approach towards audits. TÜV SÜD assists companies of all sizes with a tailored audit approach specific to your company's size and industry. We can support you with various ISO-based management system standards, sustainability, cybersecurity, as well as customized audit solutions, and of course, assisting your company with TISAX, Trusted Information Security Assessment Exchange. If you're looking for a trusted, globally recognized provider that is responsive to assist with your company's transformation and certification needs, TÜV SÜD is your partner. And now a little bit about our session today. In today's webinar, our TISAX experts, Sebastian and Tobias, will delve into how to initiate the TISAX certification process with TÜV SÜD America. They will explore various ways TISAX certification can enhance trust and discuss how it promotes secure information handling practices within your organization. And you will gain insights into the framework that helps enterprises demonstrate compliance with rigorous information security standards. You will learn practical information on how to start the TISAX certification process, a comparison of TISAX and ISO 27001, understanding the TISAX assessment levels, steps to prepare for successful TISAX audit, selecting a certification body and scheduling an assessment, and how TISAX can reduce your effort in client relations and serve as your first step to secure your information. And now I would like to turn it over to Sebastian and Tobias. Thank you so much for presenting today. And now I'll turn it to you.
Thank you very much, Susan, for the introduction. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of information on the company that Tobias and I both work for. It's Syngenity. We are a consultancy based in Germany. As we started like a number of years ago in 2020, 2019 with a focus on TISAX and branched out. Right now, there are way more frameworks in our advisory scope, and also like we're not only based in Germany anymore, but we branched out to 4 more locations worldwide. Focus still is TISAX as well as other information security standards such as ISO 27001, which would be rather my expertise. So much for Syngenity for the moment. Let's have a quick look at the agenda next. So since we're going to talk about TISAX and the entire process that is necessary to get a TISAX label, we thought it makes sense to just start with an introduction of the entire topic. Since ISO 27001 is the more prominent standard, so some of you might already have experience in that field, we thought it makes sense to compare it. So I'm going to walk you through that. And after that, I'm going to, explain to you which steps we at Syngenity go to prepare our clients for certifications, or in this case, to achieve the TISAX label. And after that, Tobias is going to take over to walk you through assessment levels, registration processes, and the audit process itself. In the end, we're also going to have time for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, that will be the time to ask them, in case there are any. All right. So about TISAX, Susan already said that the word TISAX stands for Trusted Information Security Assessment Exchange. It is a standard that was developed by the German automotive industry. The German automotive industry developed that in order to make sure that the supply chain for OEMs is secured, right? So this is kind of important to keep in mind. It's rather a supplier assessment, we'll come back to that later when talking about the ISO 27001 scope. But yeah, for now, this is where it comes from. It is specifically tailor-made for needs of the automotive industry. And the idea behind it, what's the exchange part here, you might ask, is that clients will be asked by OEMs to prove to them that they have a certain level of information security. And the way to go using TISAX is to implement the management system framework, get assessed, and then you will, receive a so-called label. Tobias is going to talk about that later, that you can share with suppliers, partners, and clients on a platform in order to prove that you're up to code when it comes to information security. So for now, it's important to keep in mind that TISAX is designed for the automotive industry, and this is kind of the background. I'm sure you all heard about it. It is a framework that was designed in Germany and is tailor-made for German manufacturers, but ever since it was first introduced, it kind of was further adopted. So it's definitely relevant for the entire European market, but also in the Americas. So I heard that, for example, Ford, but also Stellantis, and I also heard about GM, are introducing it to some degree. I don't know about it becoming an actual requirement, but it's definitely something that is well known. So that is actually a good segue into the next question. Why would TISAX matter for your business? So of course, first of all, and most important, at least that's what I think, is that it will enhance your data security, meaning implementing an information security management system, of course, reduces your attack surface, generally enhances your data security, and will result in a more enhanced information security posture overall. You're going to be using a standardized framework, meaning that when suppliers in your context tell you, well, we got a TISAX label, that will mean something to you, right? So we'll come back to that later, talking about the way that usually in the supply chain people assess information security of suppliers. This is kind of one of the main ideas behind the whole concept, that you standardize this process in a way that it also will reduce your costs. That means the process of auditing your suppliers in order to make sure that they are meeting your requirements when it comes to information security can be, costly and time intensive, and to be perfectly honest, sometimes a little bit tedious. So this is something that TISAX will take away from you in that sense. The most important aspect, of course, are improved business opportunities. In the case of Europe and Germany, OEMs actually will require suppliers to implement TISAX frameworks, meaning If you are a company that does not provide, does not manage to implement that framework, there will just not be business for you, right? They will just not conduct business with you. So, of course, this is a very important aspect when it comes to why it would matter for your business. All right. Of course, you can also present yourself as a trusted partner. That goes in hand with what I said earlier about the standardization, of course. So next, I would like to compare TISAX to ISO 27001, definitely the more known information security framework. So let's start with a couple of similarities. So both of them are actually holistic management systems. They're not just, focusing on certain branches of a company or just certain aspects of information security, but will actually, what they will ask you as a company to do is implement a management system that comprises, the entire company. In the case of ISO 27001, and we're going to come back to that later, there are ways to design the scope, but generally speaking, the idea is to have a management system that does not only focuses, for example, on software development, but encompasses everything. Like also, just to give you an example, the hiring process of new employees, or the way you do your I talked about it, your procurement processes. Like pretty much everything you can think of is part of that. So very important for both standards are the asset and risk management. I always consider them as the central pillars of a information security management system. For the ISO 27001, we have this so-called asset-based risk management approach, meaning we have to understand what are our assets and then conduct risk assessments to understand where are actually our information values, how can we save them, how are we making sure that our data and the data of our clients is secure. This is true for both cases. Then we also have incident management and BCM, business continuity management requirements that we will have to deal with in the course of implementing both TISAX and ISO 27001. They will both be verified by a third-party audit, meaning an external auditor will come to your company or do that remotely. Tobias is going to speak on that later. I'm sorry. To make sure that your management system, the one you implemented, is actually working efficiently. There are annual internal audits you have to carry out for both standards, and there's a recertification every 3 years. Now, here's another difference that I'm already talking about now, just because it appears on the slide. So for ISO 27001, you will be asked to have a certification and then a surveillance audit the next year, a surveillance audit the year after that, and then you're going to be recertified. For TISAX, that's not the case. You will just be certified, and then in 3 years' time, you will get a recertification in case the auditor gives you the green light. All right, there are same controls and measures. It's important to understand that ISO 27001 was in large parts used to design the TISAX framework. So you will have references saying, all right, this goes in hand with the control number so-and-so in ISO 27001. And with the verification tools, what we mean is pretty much as, someone who's responsible for information security or the information security management system, you have to make sure that you, that you assess if your information security management system runs efficiently and does the job it's supposed to do. Verification tools in these contexts are not like technical tools, but we'll rather think of internal audits that I already mentioned, and I'm going to mention again, or management reviews and the definition of goals and then key performance indicators and the assessment of these. All right, so broad overview of the similarities. Let's now move on to the main differences between TISAX and ISO 27001. And I already touched on that earlier. So if you ask me, I think this is the most important difference because for ISO 27001, you are rather free in defining your scope. What that means is it makes sense if you think about it, because as I said earlier, TISAX is really coming from a well, you can think of it as a supplier assessment. You as the supplier are supposed to fill out information to provide that to a OEM who wants to make sure that your operations run smoothly and according to information security standards. So it wouldn't really make sense in the case of TISAX for an OEM to accept that a company says, well, I'm going to define my scope and I'm not going to, well, include, for example, my HR processes within my management system for information security, right? Or like I won't consider the development. So this doesn't make sense because it's the reason why we implement that in the case of TISAX is to prove to a OEM or other players that we are up to the standard and we are not leaving anything out. ISO 27001 allows us to identify what we want to have within the scope for our management system, and then we can also get certified only for that scope. It is, it is a little bit too, maybe not easy. It's not self-explanatory why that is the case, but it's definitely helpful for many companies because the ISO 27001 approach, and I'm going to say something about that too in a moment, is rather a one-size-fits-all approach, meaning that no matter what size the organization has, it is designed to be a standard that can be implemented, and therefore it might make sense to also let a company freely choose the scope. Well, of course, there are other main differences we have, and I think this is generally a good way to differentiate between the two standards. We have generally some more strict requirements for certain controls. I listed incident and crisis management here. It's definitely the case. What I mean by that is that the way the standards are designed the way is different. For TISAX, you will have really concrete examples as to how you have to implement a certain control, whereas ISO 27001 leaves a little bit of room for implementation. So I have an example prepared for you for both standards. Information security and project management is something you have to address, something you have to consider. And for ISO 27001, if I'm not mistaken now, the control is 5.8. It's an organizational control. And it asks you, I noted that down somewhere, 1 second. It asks you rather loosely to address information security within project management, right? Information security shall be addressed in project management. That leaves a lot of room for implementation, room for interpretation. Whereas for TISAX, you will have very precise definitions on what you have to do in order to comply with the standards. For example, they will ask you the following: during an early stage of the project, risk assessment is conducted based on their defined procedure and repeated in case of changes to the project. Right. So this is one of several requirements that are listed, and an auditor will check all of them in case of a certification. However, even though there's room for interpretation for the ISO 27001 controls, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is easier to implement an ISO 27001 framework. There are certain aspects that require way more documentation in the context of ISO 27001, and also more substance, especially when it comes to the management system itself. So what I mean by that is, so ISO 27001 puts a lot of emphasis on the PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, and it provides a lot of information. For example, I addressed that earlier, how to conduct internal audits as a check part of the PDCA circle. So it will ask you, it has a whole list of inputs that have to be taken into consideration when carrying out an internal audit. And TISAX in that context asks you to carry out an internal audit. So I just want to say it's not really easy to say which standard is more easy to implement. If you ask me personally, I think that TISAX is a little bit more straightforward in the sense that the fact that you don't have room for interpretation can give a little bit more well, secure guidance in some aspects, and not leaving questions as to, am I going to pass the audit with this solution or not? It is like, I'm not saying it's easier to implement TISAX, and if you ask Tobias, he might have definitely a different understanding here. But I just generally would like to stress that if you have one management system implemented, upgrading to another standard, or like extending your management system so that you will receive both the label and the certificate in this case, is definitely less work than starting from scratch, obviously, right? So going from ISO 27000 to TISAX, going from ISO 27001 to TISAX is a way more relaxed project than starting from scratch, and it's obviously true the other way around. Again, a good segue to my next talking point, and that is steps to prepare for an audit. So what I would like to do here is just quickly talk about how we at Ingenuity usually conduct this. We generally start with an initial assessment, meaning, well, we have to figure out the size of the company, right? How many employees are working there? How many locations are we talking about? What's the core processes of the company? Is there already an information security management system implemented? And if we have all that information, we carry out a gap analysis, identifying gaps. Identifying those gaps we will have to overcome in order to get the certification or the TISAX label. Once we know what the gaps are, we start with the implementation. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and of course correct the gaps. And then we'll help our clients through the entire certification process, through the audit, and we'll then, normally end a project by, of course, reviewing the result and talking to the client about everything that was assessed. All right, so usually the project timeline looks like this. 6 to 9 months is, I think, a pretty solid a general idea on how much time should be planned for a project. If you have help, if you have to do everything by yourself, it might take longer. It really depends on the resources the company is ready to invest. And I'm especially talking about personal resources here, like people being able to actually carrying out the tasks. So what we'll do is, and of course projects vary, and depending on the client, it can look different, but these are definitely some very important milestones that we have to go through at some point or another. So we'll start with the documentation, meaning doesn't matter which standard in information security, you will always need to have a whole body of policies, and it can be challenging for companies to start from scratch here and just create those. So we will usually start by explaining the policies, why they are needed. We'll provide templates, and then they have to, of course, be changed in a way that they fit to the company. We will carry out an on-site inspection. That's for both TISAX and ISO 27001. Also a requirement. The physical security for TISAX, it's especially important if you're dealing with prototypes. Tobias might speak to that in a moment. Of course, then we will implement open action items that we identify on the way, right? So it's not only the gaps that we initially assessed in the gap analysis, but it's also like something will turn up on the way, and well, we have to deal with it one way or another. Vulnerability scan will be carried out in the case of TISAX. That's a requirement. We can help companies in carrying that out, of course. We'll help you with the training for all the standards. It's very important that the workforce is trained, meaning phishing campaigns, for example, could be one way to raise awareness, but what's definitely needed here are information security trainings, not only about the ISMS, the information security management system, but also about best practices. What am I allowed to do? What am I not allowed to do? as a employee of said company. The internal audit, I already touched on that a couple of times, so will help a company also in carrying that out. This is an important aspect. As I already stressed, it's important to understand that the person responsible for for setting up the information security management system cannot be the person who carries out the internal audit, right? So what we would usually do, for example, is if I have a client and I help implementing the information security management system, I, of course, cannot be the one who audits it. That would be a rather obvious conflict of interest. So Tobias might do that and assess the work that I have done. And then, again, we will have to overcome issues that were identified. The KPI management, I already talked a little bit, measurement is also something that I spoke about a little bit. So key performance indicators are a way that, to assess the performance, the overall performance of the information security management system, will help you identify those, measure the KPIs, and we stop with our project implementation phase with a management review, or this is how we end the project. This is where top management is included in the process. That's very important. You need the commitment of top management, top-level management, to be successful here. And the management review is one way to prove that, well, there is a commitment for information security. Of course, then there's the final audit. And yeah, you will receive certification or a label. So last, I would like to quickly just point to some things that are very important as far as my experience goes. It's very, very much recommended to not only start this kind of project, achieving a TISAX label, to get the label and then not deal with it anymore. So of course, companies do that, but it makes so much more sense to really take this serious and benefit from the implementation of an information security management system. It helps. As I said in the beginning, it strengthens the overall security posture. It will decrease the attack surface, and it is, for example, if you have it running for a couple of years, getting an insurance for cybersecurity issues is definitely more cost efficient if you can prove that you're running an information security management system, other than, of course, the other factors that I was already addressing, presenting yourself as a trusted partner to potential clients and partners. Right. So yeah, I think allocate time and resources is also something that I should address. Again, this is really important. The commitment has to be there. You need somebody who will be responsible for the implementation and who will be allowed to do that. And it can be kind of difficult to identify that person. But yeah, it is just not something that will work out without the commitment. All right. Last, I would just, before I let Tobias take over, I would just like to tell you that the TÜV SÜD Academy is also offering trainings in the context of TISAX. They will be more detailed and go more in depth into what requirements you have. There's a QR code here. If you're interested in that, I can recommend. And yeah, with that, I would like to ask Tobias to tell you about assessment levels when it comes to the TISAX framework.
Okay, thank you, Sebastian. Hi, everyone. After we've heard a lot about what is TISAX about and how to prepare, let's have a look at the audit point of view. So we start with the assessment levels. So you see TISAX is having 4 different assessment levels. Why? Pretty easy to explain. Your customer has various types of information, of which some may deserve a higher level of protection needs than others. The higher the protection needs, the more your customer is interested in making sure that it's safe to let you handle their information. And that's why TISAX is having different assessment levels. So let's have a quick look into the assessment levels. It starts with assessment level 1. Assessment level 1 is mainly for internal purposes. So it's more, a true sense of a self-assessment, and it's not really, or it's not ending in a label, but you need to have it for the other assessment levels. So for example, you do the next one, the assessment level 2, you have to have a filled out self-assessment. Sometimes it's possible that your partner may just request such an assessment or such an self-assessment. So that is the assessment level 1. The assessment level 2 is a plausibility check on your self-assessment. So what does the auditor do? The auditor is not coming on site to you. It's just a remote audit. And as I said, it's a plausibility check. So the auditor is checking your evidence and is checking your self-assessment and checking also uploaded evidences from your side, because you need to prove that you fulfill all requirements of TISAX without the auditor is coming to you on site. And at the end, you will have a quick closing meeting where we talk about also remotely. So the assessment level 2 is or let's come to the assessment level 3 before we come to assessment level 2. The assessment level 3 you may know from other management services or other management standards. It's a complete on-site assessment where the auditor will verify everything. So he will talk to you, he will examine the documents and the evidences. He will observe local conditions. So he will go through the location. He will observe the execution of processes, and he will conduct unplanned interviews with process participants, so with your employees. So that's the main difference between 2 and 3. So 2 is done completely remotely, and 3 is an on-site assessment. So since last year, there's a 4th assessment level. So it's called the assessment level 2.5. So it's a mix between assessment level 2 and 3. The ENX, or we as auditors, recognize that the auditees have a lot of problems with the assessment level 2. As I said, it's complete remotely, and you have to prove that you fulfill all requirements. So you have to fill out the self-assessment in a way that me as an auditor can understand without having the chance to ask something. And you need also to upload all evidences. So it needs, it's an internal effort maybe higher than at the level 3. And that's why they said, okay, let's start with the assessment level 2.5. But the assessment level 2.5 is a mix of 2 and 3. So the auditor conducts a full assessment, but not on-site on your place. It will be done remotely. So it's easier for you. You just have to fill out your self-assessment, and then the auditor is taking the same things like in an AL3. So it's asking questions and saying, okay, let's check or let's show me how you implement it. So it's easier for the clients, and we will come later on it. The other advantage of an AL 2.5 is that if your customer A says, okay, we just need an assessment level 2, and then 2 months later, the other customer is coming and saying, okay, now you need an assessment level 3, then you can say, okay, we just need to have an upgrade to the assessment level 3, and that it's a manageable effort, because it's only so you did everything in a 2.5 except the on-site location view. So the only thing the auditor has to do is to come on-site, to walk around, check the physical security, and then you have an AL3. So that's different. While the costs in an assessment level 2 are in most cases lower than in an assessment level 3, as I said, in my opinion, your internal effort may be higher. And so when you're asking about my opinion, I would always choose an assessment level 3 over an assessment level 2. So this is also not uncommon in the practice. Okay. So let's talk about assessment objectives. What is assessment objectives? So we talked about assessment levels. So this is how you know, okay, what is the assessment process look like, and how do assessment level, or how do we define assessment levels? Assessment levels will be defined with those assessment objectives. So you see, we have here 3 different colors. So it's, TISAX is categorizing 3 different parts. So the green one is requirements regarding information security. The pink one is requirements regarding prototype protection. And the blue ones is protection of personal data. So you can pick what, I would say whatever you want, but this is one thing you need to define during your registration process. We will have a look later on which assessment objectives needs to be chosen. The assessment objectives determine the applicable requirements your assessment has to fulfill or must fulfill. So how to know which assessment objectives should be chosen? That's not an easy question, honestly. The best way is your customer is saying, okay, you have to choose assessment objectives strictly confidential or prototype proto vehicles, for example. That's the easiest way. If they can't tell you anything, it's another common sense is just to ask all of the other customers you have, which hopefully one of them will tell you the answer. If it's also not clear, I would always consider selecting an assessment objective with higher protection needs. So doing so is just preventing the issues when other partners having higher requirements. So you don't need to have, or you don't need to have to do another audit itself. So for example, we're talking about confidential. You see it here on line 3. And on line 4, we see strictly confidential. So what is the difference here? If you read those texts are available on the ENX homepage as well. If we just read those texts, they are mainly similar. It only is one word that is the difference here. So you see here information with high protection needs or information with very high protection needs. So that's, without an answer of your customer, it's honestly hard to choose. So I would always recommend to choose the higher level. Then you see here the confidential and high availability. So what is the difference here? So the difference between confidential things and high or the availability things is just confidential. We're talking about the data your customer is getting to or letting you to assess them, store them, whatever. For example, construction drawings. And sorry. The availability things is for companies whose customers rely on their products or services. For example, when you're a just-in-time supplier, that's the availability part. So that's the information security parts. Then I already said regarding prototype protection. From the experience gained in different audits, I highly recommend be careful with prototype protection. It makes a huge difference if you're talking internal or your internal language usage is, yeah, it's a prototype, or if your customer is saying it's a prototype. I would only choose prototype protection in case my customer is telling me it's a prototype. So why is it so? These objectives are not that easy like the other ones in the information security. So these objectives require additional measures such as video surveillance, alarm systems, special constructions, for example, windows in resistance class 2, and so on. So you see there's a lot of physical security stuff, but also organizational stuff and additional training stuff that needs to be done here. So as I said, I would only recommend to ask your customer, is it a prototype or isn't it? Okay. So enough about the assessment objectives. So as I said, at the ENX homepage, you will find more explanations about the assessment objectives. Let us come through the registration process. So when can we start with the TISAX assessment? So first of all, you need to be registered. Registered means you need to have an account at the ENX platform, so enx.com. We won't go now through all of the processes you have to do. It's just some samples, but yeah. So first of all, you need to register. The second step is now you are registered, and the second step is that now your company needs to be registered as an TISAX participant. The TISAX participant is the one who gets the label and the one who can exchange the assessments. So first thing is that you need to have an account, and the second thing is that your company have an account. And the third thing, after you did all this, you need to accept the TISAX participant general terms and conditions. After you've done this, the next step is to register the assessment scope of your information security assessment. That's what we talked earlier about. So we need to define the name of the scope. For example, you have different scopes. So one location needs prototype protection, the other location only needs information security. So you need two different types of scopes. So the name of the scope is just to make it easier to you to identify my actual scope. Then you need to add your objectives we talked about earlier before, and then you need to add the locations that are in scope. So for all of you can decide which of your locations will be in scope or won't be in scope. So that's what you do here. And then, last but not least, you need to specify who should receive the invoice. That's something you need to do, because after you created your assessment scope, you'll get the invoice, and then you have first to pay the fee of the ENX, and after you paid, you'll get a confirmation email with all the details you filled out, with the different audit providers, and with the scope excerpt. The scope excerpt is, for me as an auditor, a good way to prepare myself for the audit. So there's everything you filled out. So your, how many locations are in the scope, which objectives will be in the scope. Is this a new information security management system for you, or have you done other management systems, or did you do an TISAX certification before? So that's what listed in the scope excerpt. And with the scope excerpt, companies like TÜV SÜD are able to give you an offer or a quotation regarding the audit process. So that's, in short explanations, all about the registration process. So then coming to the interesting part, to the audit process. So the audit process looks for those who are familiar with different management systems or management standards, looks completely the same. So we start, or we have 4 steps. We start with a kickoff. In the kickoff, it's your initial audit start, where you get an overview of the audit process. Also, what needs to be done there is to clarify the dates of the audit. When should be the on-site assessment, or until when do we have to fill out our self-assessment? Such questions. Also, it's again a confirmation of the scope, objectives, and locations. So it's sometimes it happens. You register for an audit. We're doing the audit, and then after the audit, another company is happy to receive the TISAX label because there was a different scope or location ID or scope ID or participant ID. So that's why an auditor is always asking for the confirmation of those objectives again. And then, the main important thing, it's time for your questions. So the auditor is explaining you how to prepare, how to fill out the self-assessment, what needs to be done, and how to exchange the data between the auditor and you. And then, it's time for your questions. The second step is the initial audit, so the audit step. The audit will be, as I said, in the assessment levels performed based on your objectives, so on-site or remotely. Nevertheless, the audit ends with the closing meeting. In the closing meeting, you will get a summarized of all the of the audits. So does the auditor find some non-conformities or room for improvements, or is everything fine? So then there are 2 different ways. The one is, if the auditor doesn't find anything, the audit will end with a report, and after the report, you will get your TISAX label. Valid, as Sebastian said, for 36 months, so 3 years. If the auditor has some major or minor non-conformities, they need to be first fixed before getting a TISAX label. So we will continue with the next step. The next step is the corrective action plan. Corrective action plan means you receive from the auditor a list of all his findings. And then you need to fill out the list of the findings and a plan how you want to fix them. That's the corrective action plan. And in TISAX, there's one main thing we can do. I've forgotten to add here. We can do a corrective action plan assessment. What does corrective action plan assessment mean? Corrective action plan assessment means that you are able to talk to the auditor again and explaining him how you want to fix the findings. So he is able to say, that's enough, or no, you need to rework here. So it's you can talk to each other. And the good thing is, after a corrective action plan assessment, you are able to receive a temporary TISAX label, because the auditor is already saying, okay, the company is fixing all the issues and they fix it the way I want, or the way I'm thinking that all of my found minor non-conformities are fixed. So, and the other thing is, because you see it here, the last step is the follow-up. So in the follow-up, you meet again, most of the time remotely. And then the auditor is checking if all of the findings are fixed. And if you've done a corrective action plan assessment before, there can't be a bad awakening, I would say, that the auditor is saying, no, it's not fixed, because I've said earlier before, okay, with those measures, you will be able to fix those non-conformities. So that's the audit process in a rough way. So let's have a quick look about your self-assessment. So your self-assessment is able to download on the ANX homepage. It's, as you can see here, an Excel file. And the auditor is checking all of those requirements. So you see it here, chapter 1, for example. So it's categorized in different chapters, starting with organizational topics, going through HR topics, going through physical security, IT, and so on. And each chapter has, in each column, different requirements, depending on your assessment objectives. So all of you, it doesn't matter which kind of assessment objective you choose, need to fulfill the requirements in the column must and should you see here. And what is an auditor now doing in an assessment? That's mainly a big difference between other management standards. The auditor is checking requirement for requirement, everything. Have you met these requirements, or do we have a gap here? And that's then the minor non-conformities mostly. Then you see in the front the maturity level. That's also a big difference. We're coming on the next slide. We're talking about in the next slide what are maturity levels about, but just for you to know, in your self-assessment, you need to give you a maturity level. So how do you think how good we are in these chapters? And then after filling out, you will see in the result page the picture on the right side, so that you can see, okay, there's a spider diagram, and then you see, okay, what is our result and what is the maximum score. So the maximum score is always 3, and that's what we want to achieve. So because I've talked a lot about the maturity levels, what are the maturity levels about? Maturity levels are, as I said, the goal is maturity level 3 in each chapter. So we start with level 1 or maturity level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 means completed. What does completed mean? It's an informal process. So it could work, but it also could not work. So let me give you a short example. If I'm asking your IT department about the password policy, for example, they can say, I think we'll have it in our Active Directory. So each of our employees needs to have 12 signs or 12 characters, for example. And if I'm then asking, okay, can you give me an overview of what is the password about in your company? They just say no, because it's in our heads, because we need to edit them. So this is level 1. It means it could work, but it could also work. Level 2, control, means, okay, there's a process followed and achieves the objectives. So process or process documentation is available. So let me, for a better understanding, let's take again the password policy. So we're talking about the password policy. Your IT colleagues showing me the password policy in a technical way, and then they can also show me a process description, how to configure it, or maybe what was posted on the intranet. And level 3 means established. So between level 2 and level 3, there are not that much differences. But the word established is here the thing. So the first thing is you need not only a process description, a policy or a guideline is needed here. The second thing is we need an evidence that the process has been used sustainably, and actively over an extended period, so that it's the continuous improvement. So in other words, or also again in our password policy explanation. So the IT colleagues showed me the password policy in technical way. They showed me the process description, how they should configure it, and they can show me policy all of the employees knows. Also, it's for me seeable that there's a change process in there, so it has different versions, for example. And yeah, how can we also see that it's established? Yeah, the colleagues not only using it for their clients, notebooks, or for intranet logon. Also, for example, the marketing department is using your password policy for LinkedIn, as an example. So that's what the maturity levels are about. So then, last but not least, the audit process, the maturity levels I explained, and the requirements are two independent assessment schemes, so they do not influence each other. So what does it mean? The auditor is first checking the process of the maturity, so which maturity level do we have, and then he's evaluating the conformity with the controls, so with the requirements. So it could be that you get a maturity level of 3 in the chapter, but it may certainly go hand in hand with a minor non-conformity, because not all of the controls have been met. The other way around, it could also be that you get a lower maturity level, 1 or 2, but you fulfill all the requirements of the controls, so without a minor non-conformity. So that's all I've said. I hope you gained as much as I from this webinar, and thank you for your attention. And before we finished, I think, as Susan already said it, it's now up to you to any questions. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tobias. Thanks, Sebastian. Great job today. So we have just a couple minutes left. We did have a question. TISAX is location-based. How are globally distributed development teams handled? In other words, do all associated sites need to be certified?
Tobias, do you want to answer that question?
Or Tobias, you want to take that?
It honestly depends on what your customer is saying. So normally you have a contract with your customer, for example, location, or we're manufacturing in location A. Then it's only the location. And people who are not working in this location could be seen as remote workers, something else. So you need a policy. How do they fulfill the security requirements you fulfill at your location if they are at another location? If it's, that's the answer, hopefully.
Okay.
Also, the simplified group assessment. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to briefly say something about the so-called simplified group assessment. I think that could also be interested here. There won't be time now to explain it, but it generally helps companies that have many locations spread out globally to have a rather more streamlined process to receive their certification. I think it is sample-based in a way, but I don't want to lose myself in the TISAX audit process. It's very specific. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we're just about at the top of the hour. So thank you, Sebastian and Tobias, for your time today. And I want to thank everyone for participating on today's webinar. As a reminder, the recording will be available soon if you or your colleagues have missed any portion of today's session. And don't forget to stay on to complete our short survey. We really, truly appreciate your feedback. And please visit our website, www.tuvsud.com, to learn more about TISAX, Trusted Information Security Assessment Exchange. Thank you all for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.